Just let me know once you're able to see my screen. You guys able to see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty, let's start with the presentation. And before that, let's check for the agenda. All right. So these are the topics which we have successfully covered so far, day one and day two. In fact, there are a couple of topics which I picked from day three, like meta commands. I mean, saying meta commands, I'm referring to slash n, slash I, slash d, slash dt, slash l, those kind of shortcuts, how you can get the information. I'm so sorry, guys. I mean, I'm hearing some interruption, some disturbance. Can you please, put yourself on
Yeah,
mute?
I'm,
Thank
I'm also going on mute.
you. Okay. All right, so we are done with day two. I was discussing, like in fact, there are a couple of things, not couple, in fact, many of the things which I've covered from day three as well. Like I gave you some idea about vacuuming, a little bit about indexing, what is fragmentation, and in fact, we have checked PSQL as well, like how to log in or how to connect with the PSQL and connect with the databases with your schema roles, how to check that, how to query, right? Meta commands too, like the shortcuts, how you can get, I mean, if you do not want to query or write the lengthy script or lengthy command or syntax to get the information, there are always meta commands or shortcut commands which starts with hyphen, right, with a or a slash, sorry, not hyphen, slash, I'm so sorry, hyphen, and followed by shortcut commands like dt, dti, dv, di, L for for databases, things like that. So yeah, we have covered many of the topics, but yes, today we will cover in depth about indexing and how to rebuild them, why there is a purpose or why there is a reason to rebuild indexes, what exactly is vacuuming, what are the different types of vacuuming we have, what is a fragmentation and bloating in terms of Postgres database, because this is a universal terminology or term, like you must have been heard or must have been have listened this term many times, even at the OS layer, at the OS as well, or in fact with many other databases fragmentation happens. So there are different techniques how to remove them, but today we'll be discussing about how Postgres or bloating, the other term or synonymous to fragmentation, we also call it as bloating. So how to remove it, how to identify first, how to remove it. We'll do some real-time scenarios, some demos, right? I'll make sure like you understand it better. And also there is this infamous uh, topic or infamous issue of transaction wraparound, how transaction gets wraparound and create a big mess for you. And we do some altering parameters too, like we do some, I mean, if you want to modify the default parameters, if you want to change them, how you'll do can do that, alter data, alter system, alter session, right? Those kind of commands. And at the end, we'll do some hands-on, like how to take database backup using pgdump, pgdumpall, pg-based backup, and for initdb and create, maybe I'll cover createdb with no problem. But yeah, initdb is something that requires database installation. So at the time of installation, you do the initialization using initdb command. So I won't be able to do that. As far as pgctl, we've covered it already, right? Yesterday, like how to when I was explaining how to do a bounce, like during this topic, bounce database, right? So we use pg underscore ctl to start it, right? And vacuum db, yeah, we can also check it. And on day four, we'll cover a little bit about SQL. Like though this topic is huge, very large. I mean, so many things comes under SQL or PG, SQL, right? Data types, DML, DDL. But yeah, I'll try to cover as much as possible, along with system catalog tables and information tables. So because I have also added day five, but I don't think there is any need because every now and then I discussed with my personal experience about the Postgres and the problems that I face, how to handle them, right? But yes, at the day four itself, at the end, I'll provide you some scripts or two, or I'll introduce you to a couple of tools which are not not comes by default, but yeah, are developed by community of Postgres and are very popular among the DBAs or anyone who knows Postgres, right? So yes, this last topic for day five, I'll move it here in day four, so that on Monday we have nothing. I mean, no need to join any session there on day five on Monday, right? So Friday, I mean tomorrow will be the last day, day four, where we'll cover these many topics plus these. Okay.
Yeah, Prashant. Okay.
All
Table.
right, so let's get started. Mhm. Okay. All right. So the first thing that comes in our mind, and actually in our today's agenda or in today's topic, is indexes. What are indexes in Postgres, or in fact in general in any other database? Why there is a need to have indexes? So index is what? Before that, I need to give you a little bit understanding, or and once again, I need to explain about tables. What exactly are the tables? So as I told you earlier, like table is basically a combination of columns and rows. So we have got different columns, and every column has its own set of rows or data where the data is stored. Correct. So that is the structure, the logical structure we call as table, and the data is distributed or divided or segregated in the form of rows and columns. Correct. So what happens, for example, imagine a situation when when you have a table which is, for example, 20 GB in size, or in fact 50 GB in size. Of course, like in big organization, in fact in banking, or in fact in telecom too, you see many of the tables which are quite huge in size, very big in size, like they are with size of several GBs. So imagine a situation if I'm the user and if I want to read everything that is present there. So in that scenario, a select all from that specific table will happen. And that will actually return every row that is present in that table, right? And on the other hand, we have another second user as well, and is who do not want to get every record from that table, who only want to fetch a single record, a single row from that table, right? That table contain 20 million rows, for example, and the overall size is 50 GB, right? So what will happen, for example, if I issue a command select all from that xyz table where id equals to 40? Id is a unique column, right? So we have got 50 million rows, for example, and out of 50 million rows, only one record needs to be returned to the user. So in that case, what will happen? The query will go, because there is not any index on that id column, right? So automatically it will start doing the scan, a full table scan. So it will read everything that is present in that table, and once it's find and locate that specific row, right, with id 40, then it will return back to you. So think about it, like this will be a very expensive and a costly operation in terms of, in terms of record scan, or in terms of that traversal of rows through through the session, right, which are connected to the table. So it's very expensive. So in order to improve the performance, there is this data structure what we call as index. So index was introduced to improve the performance, to optimize table performance in your query performance, right? And the objective is it basically divides let me, okay, yeah, this is the uh, a B tree index structure, the logical structure, how the data is divided, or is uh, is formed inside a B tree index. So if we talk about indexes, there are different type of indexes. If you guys have studied one subject called as graph theory, right? So graph theory is one other subject which where you actually learn about the B tree, about the graph, different types of graphs. So it's following the same principle. So this tree called B tree index or binary tree index, right? So this remains the same. I mean, we have binary tree index concept in Oracle, in my SQL 2, and here in Postgres as well. So we have the very first or the default type of index once you create an index is the B tree index. So imagine a situation, you've got a very big table. Okay, let me enable the pointer. Like you've got this big table, right? And on the top of that table or specific column, I would say, you have created a B tree index, right? So what will happen? Suppose your request comes and you want to check ID equals to 40. So first of all, this is the root node. So it will first go and hit your index, which you have created on that column. And this is the very first entry, or the very first thing which actually where the session lands. So this is called as a root node. So if you see, the very first division in this B tree index is for range 0 to 100, and next is 101 to 200. So ultimately from 0 to 400 blocks, it actually divided them with the left or right panes, right? Left hand side and right hand side of indexes. It actually divides the data into two categories, right? So once it identifies, the index identifies, okay, the request is to return value 40. So that means I'm falling in this category, this range 0 to 100. So it will not go and start scanning in these one. It will simply, move this session to the left hand side of this index here. Now if you see, it will first go and check, okay, what are the possible or the available fragments. The first fragment is for range 0 to 33, and the next is 34 to 67. So now it will skip first because the 40 value is not falling in this range. It will fall in the second range, 34 to 67. Okay. Now after that, it will be moved here, right? So this first division has contained till 33 row ID. The second one contains 34 to 67. So the my request will be sent, or the session will be connected to this division, this partition, right? So automatically a row will be identified, and what will happen, like the moment it will see that like the 40 value is here, and now if you see row ID is mentioned next. What is row ID? Row ID is nothing, is just a logical pointer to the real data, the data which is present in the table. So how it comes, when the session authenticates, and after optimizer process it and prepares a plan, then it need to be executed, so that row will be fetched from the block, or from the OS, or from the storage basically, and will be returned back to the user or the executor. So what will happen, it will connect here and reach to the exact partition or the exact division, or where it actually it has its value located. So then on the basis of row ID, it will be moved to the table, right? So this table has a pseudo column. Every table, in fact, have a pseudo column, right? Which once you check, select, I mean, this once, even if you describe a table, you won't see that, but that's something that is hidden or internal to database itself. That's called row ID. So every table has a row ID. So the moment it identifies, okay, 40 lies here, and then it has next call the number called as row ID. So it will directly go to that specific row. For example, that 40 value is available here in this section of table segment. So request will directly go and land here, right? So automatically then the result with this block will be picked and will be kept there, will be moved to the shared buffer for further processing. And then once the processing is completed, it will be returned back to user. But now when this is a select, no processing will be performed. Only this row will be picked, or this block or the row information will be picked from here and will be kept there in shared memory, and without any further processing, it will be returned back to the user. That's it. So this process of scanning that block through the index structure and then going back through the row ID to the table segment and directly return it back to the user is a very quick process. You might be thinking like, okay, it involves multiple steps, but imagine a situation when you got 50 million rows in a table and doing a full table scan. I mean, full table scan is always random, right? There is a very rare chance like you got a 40 value at a very first level or a very first entry of a column, right? It's not possible. I mean, very least possible chances are there. So in order to fix that performance problem, so index concept was introduced, and this is how the B tree structure looks like. This is the default index type. So once you create any index without mentioning index type, so automatically a B tree index will be created for you. So this is the same in case of Oracle too. Like even if you go and create a default index, so it will be automatically created as a B tree index. So if you talk about indexes, once again, they are the special lookup tables for the database, kind of a database search engine, you will say. Right. So if I need to give a furthermore example, so index in a database is what? It's very similar to an index in the back of your book. Just in your book, if you see right at the end, at the very last few pages, you see, okay, there are a few keyword mentioned, and then next after that, you'll see page numbers. So that's how you will be. Once you have that information, okay, this is the page number where this word is available or the word is present somehow, right? So you'll directly go and to that specific page and start reading about it, right? So that's how a quick scan can made, right? So in order to avoid full table scan and perform a quick scan and to skip full table scans, so the index scans are far better. There are different type of index scans method. I won't go in that much detail or depth, but yeah, at this point of time, indexing is a data structure which was introduced for every database, especially to handle post table specific request in order to improve the performance of queries and in fact the overall database too. right? So if we talk about indexes, there are various type of indexes we have. One we already covered, B-tree index, that's the default index, and that is applicable for types that can be sorted, right? So the second is hash index. That's one another type of index you'll see in Postgres, hash index. That's basically used to handle equality only. Like imagine a situation once you're doing select all from EMP, where a name like Prashant, if you believe like we might have multiple Prashant as a first name in the organization. So right, and so you want to get details only about the one which ends with Dikshit, right? So what you will do, select all from EMP where where last name equals to Dikshit, or you can also use wildcard. So in that case, a hash index will be used. All right. So if you feel like that there are frequent requests of this nature are coming and hitting the database, so it's always best to create a hash-based index on that column called as last name, right? So that is the another type of index we've got. Third type is what was that? Gist. Yes, gist index is also one of the index, right? Which is basically used to store geometrical shapes, coordinates, right? There is this Ericsson product called as ENE. Ericsson Network Engineer. So I've worked and supported few projects. I think 3 years back. So that product was basically used for network line management, right? So for example, if you want to set up tower, a telecom tower, right? So you must have to do the cabling between one tower and the next one, or maybe the main unit, the main transformer unit, correct? So in order to do a proper cabling, you have to get clear, you have to get the clarity about the location, geographical information, right? Like what all trees, buildings, parks, or images or statues or mall, or those kind of things are there in between, right? So you only need to focus on the roads, because on the side of the roads you need to dig and lay your cables in order to reach from point A to point B, right? So Ericsson Network Engineer is one of the tool that was very popular among the telecom customers, right? In order to get that kind of information, right? Like what are the geographical coordinates, right? Information systems, right? So it's basically used to store line, polygraph, circle, that kind of information, 3D images. So yeah, if you have that kind of database, so yeah, GIST index is something which can help you to improve the performance of your spatial queries. Yeah, this is the term called spatial, SPATIAL. So spatial is something that is related with the geographical information system, or GIS systems. Okay, another one is GIN indexes, GIN indexes. This is basically used for complex type. For example, you are using JSON types or arrays, then yeah, this GIN index is good for you. Then next is BRIN index, BRIN. So this, I believe this is a very new index. I think when I worked on 8 or 9 version, I don't see these kind of indexes. So I guess this was introduced in 10 or 11, I'm not sure, but yeah, this is one of the index, BRIN index, which I in fact recently implemented for one of the customers. So this is a new type of index, right? This basically support data that is used to store min and max values, right? So we have got some numbers, for example, and if you want to always look for max and min numbers in that column, so yeah, you can always use BRIN index. And there are a couple of more indexes too. I don't remember the name, because those are very uncommon, very rarely used, right? So I don't forget, but yeah, there are a couple of more, I mean, two or three more types of indexes. But yeah, these are primarily, you will see these kind of indexes created in Postgres, right? But yeah, default one is B-tree index, and the second most common is hash index. All right, so these two are very common. Apart from that, GIS index, GIN index, BRIN index, you see, in few of the systems, or database systems. Okay, bitmap index is also one of the things that are very common, that is very common in databases like Oracle. You see, like in case of low cardinality, you see a lot of indexes which are uh, bitmap indexes created. But here in Postgres, we do not have bitmap concept. Bitmap access method is there, but yeah, we do not have bitmap indexes. Oh, all right. Index related operations. So yeah, let's do some demo, right? How to create reindex, why and when there is a need to reindex, drop, and we'll do some demos. This today it will going to be very interesting. Let me connect with my virtual machine. Mhm. Where it is? Yeah. All right. So I've connected with my lab, the sandbox machine. Okay. Let's connect with the P-SQL first. Okay. And let's create a table, right? And I'll declare some primary key as well, right? Because one more information. Once you create a primary key, if you remember during the very first session, in fact, with the very first slide, I've actually used two snippets. One was there for table, like how the relational database looks like. So I discussed a little bit about primary key. So primary key is any could be any column in your table which can uniquely identify the row. There should not be any redundancy or duplicacy of rows in that column. So it's very important for a big size table. In order to improve the performance, you should always have the primary key, right? So let's because I have created a script for this purpose. Right. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating a table called as my table, right? And with a column ID with data type serial, and I'm making it as a primary key, right? And on the other hand, table number and table name, right? With this definition called as varchar with a limit 20 and 80, I'm making it as a unique entry, right? So this is a non-null. So if we do not have null values or empty values in this column called as table number, and I'm making it as a unique entry. So it will be just like the primary key, but with a very small difference. So what happened? Like after this table creation, I have executed this command, right? I have still not, because I'm soon going to do that in front of you, right? What I'm doing, I'm creating a function, right, where I'm passing this to generate some random series of data into this table. So what it will do, it will create a huge amount of data, basically these many records, right? So 1 lakh record will be inserted after the table creation into this table called as my table for our testing, right? And after that, I'll show you like I have I'm there are few default indexes that you'll see or gets automatically created after table creation, all because of this unique entry, because every column which we declare as unique or primary key, right? So primary this kind of constraint in Postgres is always implemented with the unique index. So I haven't created any index, but it will be automatically created because we have declared table number as a unique column and ID as a primary key, right? So okay, let's connect to the database, and with this you'll get some idea as well, like how to call a script. For example, if you have received a script from your application team or anyone, right, and they want to execute it on the database. So instead of typing the select and this and that, it will be very cumbersome process. So instead, what you can do, create a copy and make it as a text file using VI. But you should always end with .sql, because this is the extension what Postgres accepts, right? So for example, if you make it index am dot lm, it will not work, or log, it will not work, because sql extension is something that Postgres database understands and accepts, right? So in order to call this script directly from the OS, right, so I am connected with the database. Let's see where I am right now. I'm connected with the Enterprise DB database and with the user Enterprise DB with a port number 5444. So for example, I need to create this table and then followed by a bulk insert into this table test my table. So I will now going to call this script which is present on the operating system by using slash I, right? So here it is. And before that, let me use timing. Set timing on. Oh, oh. Yes, so the timing is on. So now after the completion of this table creation, this and followed by the insert command, right? It will present with the timing, right? How much time it actually took to complete these two instructions or command, right? So now let's get back to what I was saying. Hyphen I, and then what is the name of this file? Index A. Okay, all right. So oh my God, drop table my because yesterday we created with this table with the same name. So it actually threw out an error called relation my table is already exist. So what I did, I just removed that table my table so that should not be any conflict. Index am. Now I'm going to call it once again. All right. So the create table command has been successfully completed. Right. So this is the first thing that got executed within 9.032 ms or millisecond. Right. On the other hand, these 10 lakh rows 100,000. Oh no, sorry. 1 lakh rows took 2357 ms, right, or almost 2.35 57 seconds in total to insert 1 lakh rows into this table, right? So let's see. Yes, we've got my table, right, as a table, and if we want to check the size of this table, uh, dt plus. Okay, so my table is what we have created just few minutes back, few seconds back. And this is the size. It's right now 5920 KB in size. Okay. All right. So what next? Now let's check the definition of the table, like the table which you have just created, right? So we haven't created any index using any of the column, right? But if you see here, it will provide you some column information, right, and other storage information, but below that there is this another note about indexes like my table underscore p key. I mean, this is the name of the index that my Postgres database has already created, because for this id column, because if you remember, id column was something which I've declared as a primary key in that table. So a b tree index on a on column ID is automatically created by Postgres database, because I have made that ID column as a primary key. And the another index called as my table number underscore key is also gets created, and I haven't created manually because I have declared that column as a unique entry. So unique constraint index is automatically created, right, in order to improve the performance, right? So table number on column table number, a B tree index, which is basically unique B tree index, is created with this name, right? So I haven't created it manually, but it got created by its own because I've declared couple of rows as a key columns. So the first one is ID, which I declared as a primary key. Second one is a table number, right? So it's got created by its own. I didn't did anything, right? So now, uh, as I told you, like in the background, it's get automatically created. Now about the indexes. If you want to check like how many indexes or what are the different types of indexes that are present or available on any tables, how you can do that? There is a uh, though there is a way, di plus my table. Oh. Oh, I need to recall. I mean, there is this meta command where using which you get the index information. No worries, because there is always, views, right? What you can use in order to get the same information. If somehow the meta command is not working, or because meta command is not available for everything, right? But yeah, most of the general operations we have meta commands. So yeah, let's get this information. Like if you want to check, like for this specific table, how many indexes exist, right? And with what name? So select table name, right, and index name, index def for definition from pg underscore indexes, where table name equals what? My table. What happened? Indexes. Select table name. Uh, desk pg underscore indexes. Okay, this table is there. Select. table name, index name, index def from pg indexes where table name equals a my table. Okay. I might be doing some mistake. All right, so the query has worked for us. So we have got this information for, I mean, for the my table, like the table which we just created, right? We have got two indexes created on that table. The first one is with this name, and this is the definition, right? Though this was created automatically by the database itself because this ID column we declared as a primary key, but this is the command which it actually fired at the background. So this is the syntax: create unique index, this name on public.mytable, this using B-tree this. This is how you create an index. All right, so it's also provided you the definition or DDL of the index, like what exactly was the command used by the database to create that auto index or that automatic index, right? And now you will see, because we have enabled timing, right? So by using that slash timing instruction using this now, because the timing is on, so after every command we'll see how much time it actually took. So it took 1.886 ms. All right, now what is the next thing? Okay. Uh, okay, let me do a demo, right? This will make things more clear to you, like why there is a need to create an index. What's the purpose, right? All right, let's do select all from my table where tab name equals part 1 0 0 0 0 0. Yeah, let's get for the last entry. Okay, so it took 23.799 ms in order to fetch that specific entry from the table which contain uh, 1 lakh rows, right? So I actually asked this command to give me everything from my table where table name is equals to this, right? So it comes back to me with in this much time, 23.799 ms, right? So let me do an explain the let me show you what exactly was the access path, or how the cost was calculated for this specific command, right, by the optimizer. Explain is the command what you can use in order to get the execution plan for every query. Like for example, if you're interested or not even interested, for example, you're facing some performance problem, so of course you need to dig down deep. You need to understand where the query is spending most of its time, right? So the very first thing you should go and do is generate the execution plan of that, so that you know what our calculations or cost was prepared by optimizer, what was the access path it followed, was it correct or not, or if there is any scope of improvement or not. So that's how, right? So just before that command that caused problem, or if you want to read the execution plan for, you just need to use this command, uh, call as explain. All right. It says sequential scan on my table. Sequential scan means one by one. That is equivalent of doing full table scan. So this query actually took 23.799 ms, all because it's doing a sequential scan, a full table scan on this my table, and this is the cost, right? And it actually returned a single one row, right? Okay, so what I'll do, let me create an index and we'll see the performance after that. Create my tab t. Let me give you its name, t name. Okay, t name. Okay, idx. Just this is the name of the index that I'm going to create. Right, on what table? On my table. Right, on which column? I'll be doing it on tab name. Right, because that's where we actually put our where condition, right? So because we want to filter the data on the basis of tab name. So let's create an index with this name on this table on this column. All right, so our index is created now, correct? So let me go and do this query once again. Now if you take a look, we've got another entry here, right? This is the third index, a new index, brand new index, which is created manually, explicitly. I just created a few seconds back, right? it is not an auto index or an automatic index, which was the case with the primary key or unique constraints, right? So here it comes with the definition as well, like what what is the command, how it got created, right? So this is how it created. You need not to worry about like it use a schema name public, because I am already connected with the same one with the same schema, public schema. So that's why I didn't mention public dot my table. Okay. All right. So now when we have got the an index on that specific column called as tab name, so performance should be improved for this select query, which was earlier taking 23.799 ms. Let me redo this query. Now it's only taking 0.577. In fact, not even a single millisecond. It's now started taking microseconds. So now our query is completing in a very short span of time. So imagine a situation when we've got million of rows in a table and you do not have an index. So this time, which is currently showing ms, it could be in hours, right? Or even in many minutes, right? So in order to improve the performance, you need to understand the query first, like where is the where clause happening, right? And accordingly, you need to check if that column is indexed or not. If not, you need to index it and then check the performance. So now let's do that explanation of the plan once again, which was earlier doing a sequential scan or a full table scan on my table, and with this much cost, right? So now it should be better after index creation. Now, if you see that sequential scan is now replaced with an index scan, right? So now it's doing a scan, an index scan, basically using this index name on this table, and that's the reason we have got the final cost as 8.44 only. Otherwise, it was earlier 1986 as a final cost or cost calculation or estimation, right? So ultimately, that estimation by the optimizer is proved to be better, all because we have got a index on that specific column. So that's why it got replaced. That full table scan or sequential scan got replaced with an index scan. Is it clear now? Hello?
Yeah. Yes, Krishna.
No
Yeah,
questions?
Krishna. Yeah.
I actually today, if you see, like I'm going very slow. I'm doing lot of demos because this will make things or subjects more clear to us. Otherwise, if I keep on talking about theories, like, it will make things perplex and complicated for you. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are done with the index, like what are the types of indexes we have and how it improves the performance, how you create it. Now there are times, for example, imagine a situation, for example, if you're doing multiple deletes in your table. So every time you do a modification, a reshuffling happens in the tables, in the index structures as well, right? For example, if you removed first 100 rows, so what will happen? This range, this selection will be automatically removed, right? So imagine like something, if you delete from the table, automatically that will get deleted from this index entry as well. For example, if you delete everything that is falling between 34 to 67, automatically this will be removed, and correspondingly this partition. So this these frequent modifications, I'm sorry guys, I please put yourself on mute. I'm hearing some disturbance. Okay, so what will happen? You all because of those frequent modifications or delete or update or insertions. What will happen? This reshuffling causes a cost fragmentation, basically, right? Fragmentation to the index structure as well. So there could be a need to reindex the index structure. So maybe after, for example, if your table is very busy and every day it goes through million of transactions, so if that single piece of object in the database which goes through a lot of scans, a lot of modifications or DMLs happened on it. So of course, after some time, you realize that data is growing and a lot of DMLs are happening, modifications are happening. So I should rather go and do the reindexing in order to improve the index performance. Otherwise, what will happen at certain point of time, you see, you're not getting benefits from the index because it is fragmented, right? Okay, so how you do the reindexing? Let's do reindex of this index called as this, right? Uh, Sorry, reindex, index, right? Okay, so it successfully reindexed the structure for this index called as my tab name IDX, which we just created, which helped us to improve the performance of this query, right? So For example, if this was update or a delete and it's doing massive delete operations. Humongous amount of rows get deleted every day from this table. So because index structure is always dependent on table structure or rows, so automatically that reshuffling or reordering happens in index as well. So all because of those reshuffling, a performance can degrade. So maybe during the weekend when no one is connected to the database, you can go and do the re-index. So this is a maintenance activity which DBS do quite frequently during the weekends or during the off-peak hours maybe. Okay. And for example, if you realize, okay, this is only a one-time query and I don't want to acquire a space on the disk because every index, acquires a space as well on the disk, right? The index, just like table, has its own data file, right? FSM and VM structures. So if table size is big, then definitely its corresponding index size will be very big. So for example, this is only a one-time query and there is not any use for this index, right? So you can always go and do this drop index. That's it. Now the index is gone. Now if you go and do the query, that third index which you created earlier, it's gone. It's not there because you dropped it intentionally because there is not any use. And what could be the third scenario? For example, if your index got corrupted, because ultimately for an index file are basically data files which stays there on your disk. So if the index file or that OS block got corrupted, that means automatically your index file will be of no use. Then you start seeing full table scan. Even if you have index, the optimizer will not pick because ultimately it's not in a readable format. Something is bad with that index definition or structure. So even in that scenario, when the index got corrupted, you can always go and do the re-indexing. It will be quite helpful for you. Okay, but next. Okay, what is MVCC architecture and its issues? It's a very broad topic, right? And it's basically an OS concept. I'll not go into the deep, but yeah, I'll explain what is MVCC. So MVCC stands for multi-version concurrency control. This is basically implemented by different databases, which follows MVCC architecture, right, for concurrencies, right? So what happens, like, uh, with the Postgres database, because it follows MVCC architecture, right? So it basically maintains the hierarchy or the lineage of the data. For example, if you got a table, right, and you got a table and you deleted that row. So that row is not automatically deleted from that table. What it will do, it will declare that specific row which you ask database to remove from the table as an orphan row or a dead tuple. So dead tuple is the precise term. Dead tuple or a row, dead row. We can also call it dead row because in Postgres we use tuple instead of row, right? So dead row will be created. So in total, if you so for example, if you do the select all from that table and after that deletion, you will not see that row. But ultimately, you know, uh, internally, it will hide that information from the user, but that information always remains there. So even if you do an update, for example, if you make a value ID from 400 to 500, so what it will do, it will do an insert extra row because okay, let me once again explain. It might confuse you. What happens, like for example, you have a table, right, and in that table you got 10 rows. Out of that, id is the column which got 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 till 10 values. That's unique, right? And for some reason you want to update, you want to make value 10 as 11 because that employee with the id 10 is not with the organization, he left the organization, right? So you do not want that value 10 to there to be present, right? You want to remove that from the table so that only 9 entries should be there. What you'll do, you execute or you ran that delete command on that table. So what it will do, table count is only 9 after that deletion, but for database it will always be 10 because that last row which we deleted with the value id 10 will be there and will be remain there as an orphan row or as a dead row or a dead tuple, right? So what happened over the imagine a situation or a scenario when this happens, these frequent modification, deletes or updates happens on a table which is very big in size and goes through a lot of modifications every day. Every second it goes through million of transactions, thousand of transactions, let's say, right? So in that hypothetical situation, what happens is, like, at certain point of time, right, because every table, every row has this entry called as transaction ID. So after a certain period of time, these transaction IDs will be exhausted, right? Because if it goes through million of transactions every day, so even for a single delete, it's basically two entries to be made. One is for the orphan row and second is for the newer value. I mean, in case of update, right? For example, if you're doing an update, when you're making a change from 10 to 11, so what it will do, making previous value 10 as an orphan row or a dead tuple, and value 11, which is new, it's a brand new value. So ultimately, for single transaction or single statement, it increased by two transaction IDs. So you might reach a point when your table is exhausted with every transaction ID. That is because there is a limit. Only 2 billion transaction IDs can be allocated for a single table. So with every insertion or with every operation, basically for every insertion, for every update, for every delete, for everything that you do with the table, a transaction ID gets, or this counter gets incremented. So if your table goes through a lot of transaction, that means at certain point of time in future, you will hit a point when every ID is exhausted, not even a single ID is left. So what will happen? This will you won't be able to do any transaction to your database. In fact, with the table too. So you will be stuck in a situation. So that's the biggest challenge with the MVCC architecture. But yeah, there are certain advantages too. But yeah, there are some flaws. So this is one of the flaw with MVCC architecture, because Postgres database follows MVCC architecture. So you'll see the same behavior happening in the Postgres database too. Okay, so I actually covered this second topic too, like what is the problem with PostgreSQL MVCC architecture, because it creates dead tuple and transaction wraparound problem. So dead tuple, as I told you, with every delete, with every update, these two operations, a new entry with the brand new transaction ID will be provided, will be allocated. That actually, so this counter will kept on increasing. So in case of a very volatile table or very frequently accessed table, so you might reach a point when you exhaust every possible transaction ID, and that problem is called as a transaction wraparound problem. So you will stuck in a situation of a wraparound. So what will happen? Automatically database will, once 2 billion transaction IDs are allocated, then next modification will directly go and will reassign value 1. But if 1 to 2 billion is already allocated, but this wraparound will happen. This now next time after reaching 2 billion, it will go and will reuse value 1, but there is already a value or a row sitting with transaction ID 1. So if you go, if a new session that has to allocate 2 billion plus 1 value, because there is already a limit for 2 billion, that extra value will now started consuming or will replacing or rewriting the transaction ID starting from 1. So that will ultimately make your older data of no use. So you will be stuck in a very difficult situation. So now what is the solution? Are you with me? I mean, are we all in sync, or do you have any doubts?
No question. You carry on.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Okay, now next point is, what is bloat or fragmentation? Sorry, this is not off or. What is bloating or a bloat or fragmentation in Postgres database? So think about the situation. Like, we've got this table. I'm using this image below. Right. Let's forget about these values, update and this and that. Let's take a look here on this table with a column ID and with a column name. And these are the different rows, value 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. For example, I ran this delete, which has to delete value 2 and 3 with ID 2 and 3 from this table. Right. So what will happen? Automatically, your table structure will start looking like this. You have a value 1 with name test1. With ID2, you have to jump two empty blocks or rows, and then so you have to reach 2 and 3. So you've got some empty space, some whole open space in between, which is called as a fragmentation or bloating in Postgres. So how you will remove it? Right. Next question is how to remove it. So the answer is vacuuming. Right. So vacuum is something that you have to use in order to fix your dead tuple problem and also the transaction wraparound problem. So for both these two problems of MVCC architecture, you have to go and frequently do the vacuuming. Now, coming back to the point, what exactly is vacuuming then? Vacuuming is basically divided into several types, right? But I'm going to discuss only about the general vacuum or ordinary vacuum and vacuum full. I've only used this image. So I've actually created for one of the customer, but yeah, that's why I've removed this information from here because it got some customer sensitive information. Okay, so in total, we've got, in short, we've got vacuum and vacuum full as two techniques to handle this dead tuple problem or fragmentation issue and transaction wraparound problem of exhausting your transaction IDs, right? So the first one is the vacuum or the general or ordinary vacuum, right? So what it will do, eh, basically, in case of vacuum, vacuum scans your table, it scans your table completely and then marks the tuples or rows that are no longer needed, right, and make it as a free space, right? So what this, after you do your this vacuum here on this table, your table structure will something like this, like for not exactly this, I mean to say an empty space will be created, a free space. I mean, you do not have your the dead tuples here. Dead tuples are gone after vacuum, but the space is still not reclaimed to the OS, right? Because you still see that the space is still like this. You've got some empty spaces, but ultimately, yeah, dead tuples are gone. You do not see previous values now available after you do the vacuum or general or ordinary vacuums, right? And uh, because as I told you, it will go and we will start doing a scan on this table and then start marking those rows which are no longer in use as a free space, so that later on they can be overwritten by new insertions or updates. Right. On the other hand, if you check vacuum full, for example, if you run vacuum full on your table, but yeah, there is a condition, there is a caveat. What is that? With vacuum, no exclusive locking is required. I mean, if you're doing vacuum on your table, it will not interrupt, your operations. So for example, I am the administrator and I ran a vacuum on this table, then you need not to worry about the other sessions. For example, I'm the user, I have the right to modify anything in that table. So I won't be halted. No, a pause will happen and automatically, during that vacuum process, and I'll be able to perform my activity of update, delete, and insert or select whatever, right? At the time, even if vacuum is happening in the background, right? Because it doesn't interrupt the operations. But on the other hand, the next what I'm going to discuss is vacuum full or a complete vacuum. What is vacuum full? Vacuum full is basically helps to resort the rows and reclaim the space, that free space from the deleted rows back to your OS, right? And also vacuum full is the default vacuum operation, right? So as I told, like it basically rewrites the entire content of the table into the new disk file with no extra space. So right, so what it will do, it will pick this table with this structure, right, and then it will create a brand new table after removing these two, right? So it will, now your new table will look like this. And this is what we want, because we do not want these two values anymore, because this was causing dead tuple problem and also the transaction wraparound problem. So after doing vacuuming on this kind of structure, your new structure will look like this, because it will ultimately create a brand new copy on the disk, right? Where first it copies, the real data there, and that's how it helps to reclaim the space. And once this operation is completed, it will go and drop the previous table, right? As I told you, like vacuum full is requires access exclusive lock, I should say, on the table, because while this is going or happening in the background, and therefore you cannot do any parallel operation, right? Generally, administrator always strive and advise to for the standard vacuum and avoid full vacuum during the daytime or during the business hours. You can do business during the business vacuuming, right? That will also improve your performance, but you want to reclaim your space back to your OS. So you have to do vacuum full. But yeah, we never ever recommend to do that during the peak hours. But yeah, there are some exceptions. I will not discuss about exceptions, but yeah, only during the weekends or during the off-peak hours, we go and do the vacuum full on those tables, which goes through a lot of stress during the day-to-day operations or duties, right? Okay. Now, I guess in order to make this topic of vacuuming more understandable, let me do a quick demo. Let me create a table with the name demo1. Okay. And I'll create a column ID and assign it as a integer. Okay. And ID2, let's make it integer as well. Right. What happened? Yeah. Okay. That table is created. Correct. Now do the insert. I'm going to insert some random values into this demo1 table. Right. Generate series is basically a default function what you can use always to do the bulk update, bulk inserts into the. So what you'll do it from one to how many rows? Let's add it's 100,000, 10,000 lakh, 10 lakh row. Oh, that's too much. Uh, let's do it only 1 lakh. Yeah, for instance, 100,000 in lakh. Okay, yeah, 1 lakh entry. It will go and create as a random value into this table. Generate series 1 to 1 lakh. What's the mistake? Oh, oh. Uh, sorry. I know what the mistake I did. Proper closure is required because I opened this bracket here, right? And then I, I opened one more like with this, right? What happened? Mm, generate series. Okay. With this generate series, right? What's the mistake I'm doing? Number one. Just a second. Mm, mm, insert. Let me do that once again. Into yes, and I'll assign it as one. Oh, oh, sorry. Okay, yes, so might be doing some mistake. All right, so successfully I've inserted 1 lakh record into this table called as demo one. All right, now let's do and do a check, like how many, what exactly is the free space available, right, on this table. Uh, let's make it n pages. On average on availability, right, and we don't know block 81. Okay, average. Okay, my free space. Name of the table is demo one. Okay. What happened? Into explicit typecast. Mm, come on, man. What's the mistake I'm doing now? I count all as n pages. Right. And then I'm doing a round on this. Average on availability. 8192. I make it as real as ratio free space. Hmm. Okay, yeah, that's the problem. I'm using on version 12. It's not here. Ooh. Okay, I'm so sorry, guys. Because I tried to use PG underscore free space. The stable PG free space is not available because I'm running on version 12. Okay, I guess no problem. So what I'll do, let me show you how exactly it looks like, right? Vacuum. vacuum full. All right, so this vacuum is successfully completed. That's how you do the vacuuming. And same way you do right? If you see, while doing the vacuum or general vacuum, which does not provide your storage or your free data back to your OS, it actually came back very quickly. Only took 27.584 ms. On the other hand, vacuum full, because it create a copy of the table, right? So then it took 91.52 ms. I thought like I show you a demo, but yeah, the free space is unfortunately not available in this version. Okay, no problem. Mm. Uh, okay, and example, if you want to check, because as I told you, like this is always a kind of a routine activity which administrators do quite frequently. So for example, if you're receiving any complaint from customer, okay, saying okay, the select on this table is very slow, what happened? So you should go and check like when was the time the statistics were collected, or the vacuuming was actually executed, or when was the last time vacuum got executed against that table where the performance is an issue, right? So how you can check that? uh, PG start user table, yes, that user tables. Okay, yes, here is the table. Let's use it. Schema name, relation name, I mean table name, last vacuum, yeah, the last vacuum. And last auto vacuum, let's see if auto vacuum did anything on that table, and what was the vacuum count, how many times vacuum got executed on that table, right? And also the auto vacuum count, right? And this analyze count is basically how you do this stats collection manually, right? From pg stat user tables. Okay, let's check for all tables. Okay, here we go. So two tables, Tesla table was last vacuum on this specific date. And how many times it got vacuumed? Only single time. On the other hand, demo one, which you just did few seconds back, it got vacuumed at this time, only single time. And it was not vacuumed through auto vacuum daemon, but it was manually uh, manually collected or manually vacuumed. Now, for example, if you want to analyze your table, right, how you do it? Analyze is what? Analyze is basically how you collect the statistics. As I told you, for example, we did some, let me go reuse that screenshot. Okay, for example, earlier your table structure looks like this. I mean, with the table count, we have got uh, five. Five is the total count of rows in this table. But after this deletion, it started looking like this structure. That means now the table count is three. But your database or your optimizer basically need to have that information. If that information is not updated on the table, then it will still count it as like this. It will go and do the scanning using this data, what it actually sees through its eyes. So it's important to run analyze as well along with vacuum. Yes, you can also do vacuuming and analyze at the same time, at the same using the same command line instruction, right? So that's how you improve the performance of the uh, your table, right? So for example, if someone is complaining like there is some problem with it, I mean with one of the table, and what's the cause, what's the problem? So how you will improve the performance? You first of all go if the statistics are fresh or not, they are connected, I mean they are collected properly, and if they are connected, I mean they're collected, but even then the problem is there, performance still not improved, you try to recollect them or reanalyze them. Even after that you observe the performance is still bad, right? So you can go and do the vacuuming, and if even after vacuum the problem is there, do vacuum full, right? So these are few of the things what you can do in order to improve the performance, right? So Okay, now if you see, like I actually executed analyze as well along with the vacuum command, right? So earlier we used vacuum. Uh, okay, do it like this way. Vacuum full. I think this will not. Yeah, the count is still 2. Yes. Okay. So what we did, we did. Sorry. Oh, I made a mistake. Yes. Yeah. Now analyze count has been incremented. Okay. Now if you see, I I actually vacuum full this table demo, and at the same time I analyze it. Right. So in order to get the fresh statistics, you need to analyze your table. And in order to remove the extra bloating and defragmentation, you have to do vacuuming. But you can also do uh, these two operations in one go using vacuum or vacuum full command alongside analyze for your object or table, right? If you check here in pgstat user tables, every time I do vacuum full analyze, this counter kept on increasing, right? You see now earlier it was 2. After doing this command, this analyze count is it got increased. The same is the case with the vacuum count, right? All right, that's it, I guess, about the vacuuming. I mean, we discussed about both full vacuum, right, and general vacuum. But yes, I tried to do a demo, but unfortunately I won't. I because that PG free space, which is a function that is used to get the free space, is not available here in 12 somehow. So yeah, that demo is not possible. But yeah, once you have that information, as I told you, like if table goes through a lot of modification and manipulation, so of course you have to do vacuum during daytime if it's really mandatory or required, and after that during the non-peak hours you have to do the vacuum full on that object to reclaim the free space and for better performance. Mm. Ah, okay, and as I told you, like this vacuum that involves both full vacuum and partial vacuum or general vacuum removes your dead tuple problem, right? And it also removes the transaction wraparound problem, right? So because transaction wraparound problem is one of the most infamous issue with Postgres database, right? Because once it about to reach or already reached to billion of IDs, transaction IDs, then I mean it could be a case with a reasonably active database, right? So and especially if you have disabled the auto vacuum, because if you remember, auto vacuuming is also one of the background daemon which always keeps running in the background and keeps an eye on the table, which frequently goes through the modification. So it will go and auto vacuum the table by its own, right? So there is not any need to do a aggressive vacuuming for the tables, because that is maintained or managed by auto vacuum. But in some of the systems, some of the environments I've seen, like auto vacuuming is disabled because the systems are quite big. So imagine a situation if that auto vacuuming is on, right? So and you've got a very huge size table, so it start doing vacuuming during the peak hours, so that will degrade your performance, right? So yeah, I mean, in fact, many of the customers, so I've seen like they have disabled this option of auto vacuuming in the database, all because their data is too huge. They do not want to take the risk of performance degradations during peak hours. So they disabled it. And yeah, there are certain other reasons as well. I know that there are a couple of bugs. Sometimes I see like this auto vacuuming thing takes forever to complete. Yeah, there are few issues even with version 12. I'm not sure about 13 and beta version 14, but yeah, till for 12, there are still issues with the auto vacuuming thing. So maybe that's the reason why, DBAs and customers do not want to enable auto vacuuming. But yeah, for a small size database where, it's not that active or busy, you can always do the auto vacuuming on, right? It ultimately helps to improve the performance. So as I told you, the easiest way to handle the transaction wraparound problem. So, but yeah, of course, this is not necessarily the quickest. Is to get the highest transaction IDH, right? Where you actually force a vacuum on the entire database cluster, right? So, I mean that's the best way how to do this, cluster-wide vacuum. For that we have this utility called as vacuum DB binary utility that comes along with PostgreSQL. So let me show you. Okay, so we are right now here. Where is the DB? Yeah, this is the utility. If you do hyphen all, right, and hyphen freeze to freeze the IDs, right? Hyphen jobs for the parallelism. Huh? Let's do some echo as well. And let's do the analyze as well. Take a look. It start doing vacuuming for everything that is there on the database. So we use this utility called as vacuum DB. And as I've passed an option of hyphen hyphen all, so that means it ensures all the database are vacuumed, right? Because this, as I told you, this transaction ID is a global value, right? And the next thing I have forced the freeze option because that ensures a more aggressive vacuum. Error vacuuming of database enterprise DB. Okay, no, don't worry about this. This got successfully vacuumed, but accept this vacuum DB database because we have created a external table space, but that somehow is not present. That's the problem because if you go and check this location, uh, pg data and then pg underscore tb. You see, like this file starts with 3200755 is not present. We've got 321492, but not this one. So all because of this file is gone. So you have to clean this entry first and then retry it. Okay, so I'll make a note of it. Uh, all right. So what I used this command, right? Vacuum DB as which is basically not a command but a utility. Otherwise, if you want to do this activity through your database, you can always use what I just explained, vacuum and vacuum full commands. But instead, if you want to use vacuum DB utility, you can do that. It's present in the bin directory where all the software utilities or executables present, all for all of the databases. And this freeze option to basically to to ensure like a more aggressive vacuum is to run to ensure as many tuples as possible as frozen in that table, right? And this job is for parallelism. Echo is to show what's going on, what it's actually doing right now. Otherwise, it will not show. It won't show you anything. I'll only come back with error or once it gets completed. And after that, we also used this analyze so that it also do the analyze. I mean, collect the fresh statistics about the table size and about the row number or row counts. Okay, that's it. What else? I think we already discussed about auto vacuuming, right? And like this auto vacuuming daemon is, as I told you, like this is an optional feature, but yeah, it automatically vacuums to your database. It's very good sometimes if your database size is small and you have not busy database, right? So this daemon, this background process, let me show you how it looks like. As we already covered, the x ww, all right, and do grab. Uh, yes, because I have two Postgres database. The first one is the open source Postgres. The next is the enterprise DB. That's why we're seeing auto vacuum launcher. So auto vacuum launch, two auto vacuum launcher processes there. Why? Because one is for the open source Postgres, another one is for the enterprise DB Postgres. PSF. If you see, this one is owned. This auto vacuum launcher process is owned by enterprise DB username, and the another one is through the open source Postgres. Okay, what else?
To remind you, we have a weekly sync up call around 11:30.
Okay,
So we
I think yeah, I have still have 7-8 minutes, right? So let
yeah.
me quickly do that for you.
Okay.
Uh, and if you want to check anything about the about any specific setting, for example, settings where name like auto vacuum. Okay, let me do the wildcard. Okay. Uh, leave it. And yeah, one more thing. For example, if you want to set, if you don't want your table to get auto vacuum through that automatic launcher, right? So you can always disable it, right, for that specific table. So that if your table size is big, so you can always disable it. You don't want to set it, don't want to consider that by the auto process or the auto vacuuming. All right, so very quickly, let's try to finish the last thing, modify how to alter the DB system parameters. Right. Okay, let me do a demo then. It will help you explain everything. Let me do, what's the time right now? Let's check for the time zone. Okay, this is the time zone right now. This is time on the system. Let's check for settings. Hey, Miko, let's check the time zone. Huh? Uh, okay, so the time is Toronto time, American time, Toronto time right now. Okay, so it's 1:56 AM right now in Toronto. So for example, if you want to change the system, so what you can do, you can alter your system, set uh, time zone equals, let's make a UTC 4 UTC. Okay. Right, so this command is successfully completed, right? Because now if you go and see, the time is still the same, right? It's still 1:56. I mean, the 1 second is 1 minute is incremented because it actually took while doing this operation. Otherwise, time zone is still the same. So though we have modified it, right, it should be showing time in UTC 4 because we have made an alter system change. I mean, this entire system wide change. So in that scenario, what you have to do, you have to reboot your database. Or else what you can do, you can also do the PG reload configuration, but not every change goes through the PG reload. But let me see. Let me do the select PG reload conf. Okay, true. Now if you see, yes, so you we didn't require to do the reload. Sorry, do the complete shutdown and stop and start or bounce of the database because we use PG reload configuration. We ask a database to set our time from Toronto time to UTC 4. So earlier, even after setting this change, we are still seeing the old value of the time, right? Time zone, because it's still not reflected. In order to make that change persistent, you have to either reload your configuration or else you need, what you can do, you can always go to the bin directory and then use the pgctl command. Let me show you how we used last time. Okay, so pgctl and then -d, your data directory path, stop and start. That will also do the solve the purpose. But yes, instead of doing that, you can also try with pg reload conf, right, which actually reloads the command line for you. We still got 2 more minutes. Okay, let me give you one more example. Like if you remember, like there is this parameter called as workmem, right? So workmem is something that you set in for your session specific operations. For example, if you do a lot of hash and bitmap scan or sorts, then you might need to increase the workmem. Okay, cg pg pg data. Okay, all right, more Postgres. Let's first check what is the current value. So as per the configuration file, work memory is set to 4 MB. All right, now you can also confirm here through command. Yes, though it's session wise is 9 MB, but ultimately at the system level it's set to 4 MB. Now let's do set work underscore mem to 16 MB. Right, let's show it's showing 16 MB. So we have already increased that size, right? But again, as I told you, be very careful, very cautious while changing work memory. Those actually helps to improve the performance of your queries. But yeah, there are always dangers in changing this work mem value because it refers to the memory available to a single operation that you do for individual hash and sort operations. So even for a single query, you can use several times the defined value. So always consider that servers are often serving many queries simultaneously. So be very cautious. Extra attention need to be paid once you modify work mem. Okay, that's it. Right, I don't have anything to explain. Like we already did for modify alter DB parameters. We just did. I'm actually left with backup, pg dump all pg based backup. So I'll try to cover it tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, Prashant.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Now you can, stop that presentation. I mean, that recording for this session. And let's quickly close this. Okay. Thank you so very much, guys. I'm
Yeah,
dropping off.
yeah. So thank you so much, Prashant. Bye, Arun.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Prashant.